After gathering the courage to reveal his feelings, a student finally confessed to the girl he had been in love with. Determined to change his situation, he made a sincere invitation, putting everything on the line in that decisive moment of his school life. Seeing his confession finally happen, the student believed that all of his efforts had been worth it. However, while waiting for a decisive response, something unexpected happened, leaving him confused and unable to understand what he was seeing before his eyes. At the very moment he expected to hear the answer to his confession, the student was shocked by a sudden change in his surroundings. Confused and frightened, he realized that he had been taken to a completely unfamiliar place, with no understanding of what was happening. As he tried to figure out where he was, the young man fell into despair upon realizing that he had been transported to an unknown location. While searching for the girl who had been standing before him only moments earlier, a mysterious voice suddenly appeared out of nowhere and called out to him unexpectedly. Unable to comprehend the situation, he was completely stunned as he realized that something supernatural was taking place. While trying to understand the situation, the young man was surprised by the appearance of a mysterious woman with a divine presence accompanied by a little girl. The stranger revealed that she knew who he was and observed him with a calm smile, leaving him even more suspicious and confused by that impossible encounter. The woman revealed herself to be a goddess and claimed that she had an important request for the young man. Without giving him the chance to refuse, she made it clear that she was responsible for bringing him to that place. Shocked by the revelation, he demanded an explanation, but quickly realized that he had become involved in something far greater than he had imagined. After discovering that he had been torn away from an important moment in his life, the young man became furious and demanded to be returned immediately. The goddess, however, remained calm and assured him that she would send him back if he agreed to hear her request. With few options available, he realized that he would have to listen to what those mysterious beings had to say. After finally agreeing to hear the goddess out, the young man received an absurd and unexpected mission. Without beating around the bush, she asked him to save the world, leaving him completely incredulous at the magnitude of the task. Even though he was reluctant, he realized that he would need to understand the situation better before making any decision. The goddess explained that the world was not in immediate danger since the Demon King had recently been defeated. However, she revealed that he would return decades later, following a cycle that repeated endlessly. Upon learning that a new generation of heroes was destined to face him in the future, the young man became even more confused about why he had been chosen to get involved in such a problem. The goddess revealed that the Demon King's return was the result of an ancient curse cast before his final defeat. Although the villain had already been defeated countless times throughout history, he continued to return repeatedly, turning everything into an endless cycle. As he tried to make sense of that absurd situation, the young man realized that the true reason for his summoning had yet to be revealed. The goddess finally revealed the true nature of the curse left behind by the Demon King. Instead of directly attacking the world, he stole the ability to love from the 7 girls destined to give birth to the future heroes. With the birth of the next generation threatened, the fate of the entire world was placed at risk, turning the problem into something far more serious than a simple battle against evil. After hearing the entire explanation, the young man discovered the reason he had been summoned to that world. The goddess believed that only someone with exceptional knowledge of relationships could break the curse and help the 7 girls regain their ability to love. Thus, he was given the unusual mission of guiding them toward love and ensuring the birth of the future heroes who would save the world. Upon learning of the absurd mission he had been given, the young man reacted with complete disbelief and began questioning why he had been chosen for something so important. While the goddess insisted that he was the ideal person for the task, he remained suspicious and irritated by the entire situation. Even so, he gradually began to realize that escaping this unexpected fate would not be easy. When questioned about his qualifications, the young man revealed a surprising confidence in his knowledge of romance. Convinced that he could easily win over beautiful women, he responded provocatively, leaving the goddess completely speechless. His arrogant attitude turned the conversation into an unexpected confrontation, showing that the mission promised to be far more complicated than it seemed. Upon hearing the young man's excessive confidence, the goddess reacted with indignation and made it clear that she did not believe winning someone's heart was as simple as he claimed. As the two argued, the little companion watched the situation nervously, realizing that the conversation was turning into a clash of egos. Despite the provocations, the young man maintained his confident attitude, determined to prove that he was right. To prove his point, the young man suddenly approached the goddess and left her completely speechless. The unexpected gesture shocked her, while he maintained a confident expression, demonstrating that he was willing to put his words to the test. The goddess, who had been confident moments before, became visibly embarrassed by the young man's bold behavior. Noticing her reaction, he showed that his words were not merely arrogance, leaving her completely flustered for the first time. Continuing his demonstration, the young man unexpectedly complimented the goddess on her beauty. His words left her blushing deeply and unable to respond, showing that his confidence was shaking even a divine being. Maintaining his act, the young man continued treating the goddess as though they were in the middle of a romantic confession. Already completely embarrassed, she began to falter under his words and actions, realizing that she was being charmed far more easily than she had imagined. After leaving the goddess completely flustered, the young man revealed that everything had merely been a demonstration of his abilities. While the little companion was impressed by the outcome, he explained that he had simply manipulated the situation intelligently, proving that his confidence was not unfounded. The young man explained that he had used his knowledge of human behavior to influence the goddess's emotions. By reducing the distance between them, maintaining eye contact and acting at the right moment, he managed to leave her emotionally shaken, revealing that everything had been part of a carefully calculated strategy. The young man revealed that his strategy involved creating a sense of intimacy in a short period of time. Using eye contact, physical proximity, and behavioral synchronization, he managed to influence the goddess's emotions, causing her to react as though she were standing before someone truly special. While explaining the final details of his strategy, the young man demonstrated that the goddess had already been completely influenced by his actions. Impressed and unable to react normally, she ended up giving in with ease, making even him realize that the supposedly divine entity was far more vulnerable than he had expected. After proving his abilities in an unexpected way, the young man turned his attention back to the true mission. Determined to solve the problem and return home, he requested more information about the 7 girls and confirmed that he expected to be sent back if he successfully completed the objective. After receiving the guarantee that he would be able to return to his normal life, the young man finally accepted the mission. Motivated by his desire to finish the confession that had been interrupted, he decided to help the 7 girls and solve the problem, taking on the challenge with renewed confidence. The goddess revealed the final condition of the mission. In order to return to his world, the young man would have to make the 7 girls affected by the curse fall in love. Faced with such an absurd requirement, he was shocked to realize that his return now depended entirely on the success of that task. After explaining the mission, the goddess left everything in the hands of her little assistant and disappeared without further concern. Alone with his new guide, the young man received an apology for the deity's impulsive behavior and realized that he had a long journey ahead of him to accomplish that impossible task. The little assistant enthusiastically embraced her role and promised to help with whatever was necessary throughout the mission. Although he accepted her support, the young man made sure to establish certain boundaries, making it clear that he was still uncomfortable with the exaggerated title they had given him. Not knowing where to begin, the young man asked his new companion for guidance. Without wasting any time, she revealed the location of the first girl who needed to be saved, officially beginning his mission to restore love and secure his return home. Guided by his little assistant, the young man was transported to a vast kingdom and was amazed by the grandeur of the city below. As he tried to adjust to the situation, he discovered that his first target was the captain of the Royal Guard and a student at the Night Academy, marking the beginning of his mission to restore love in that world. As he approached his first objective, the young man discovered that the girl was an extremely powerful warrior, belonging to a clan famous for hunting monsters along the kingdom's borders. After hearing her story, he began to realize that this romantic mission was starting to resemble a fantasy adventure filled with danger. To make his mission easier, the little assistant had already prepared everything in advance and enrolled the young man in the same academy as the girl he needed to win over. Although he was worried because he knew nothing about that world, he was informed that he would receive assistance throughout the entire journey, even though he continued to doubt that the plan would actually work. While heading toward his mission, the young man ended up revealing that the girl he had confessed to before being transported was his first love. Upon hearing this, his little companion became surprised and embarrassed that she had witnessed that moment, while he showed that he was still determined to return and finish what he had started. Upon arriving at the academy, the young man was guided to an arena where a major battle was taking place before a large crowd. Watching from a distance, he finally caught sight of his first target and realized that she was participating in an intense fight, displaying strength far beyond what was normal. While observing the battle in the arena, the young man watched a skilled warrior defeat her opponent with ease and earn the applause of the crowd. His assistant then revealed that she was Marion Bonnet, the first of the 7 girls affected by the curse. Realizing that his mission had finally begun, he carefully observed the young knight he would need to win over. The following day, the young man was officially introduced as a transfer student at the academy. His arrival sparked the curiosity of the other students, who began wondering who the newcomer was. Without drawing too much attention to himself, he entered the classroom knowing that his mission to get closer to the first girl was finally about to begin. As he introduced himself to the class, the young man made an excellent first impression with his polite and confident demeanor. His refined appearance quickly aroused the curiosity of the other students, who began creating various theories about his origins. While capturing the attention of the class, he was already taking the first steps toward completing his mission. While carefully observing his first target, the young man put into practice everything he knew about making a good impression. To his surprise, he ended up receiving the seat right next to Marion, creating the perfect opportunity to begin getting closer to her and take the first step in his mission. Upon meeting Marion for the first time, the young man was surprised to discover that she was far more friendly and charming than he had imagined. As they talked, he began analyzing her carefully, concluding that his first mission might not be as difficult as it had initially seemed. After analyzing Marion with a special ability granted by his assistant, the young man discovered detailed information about the girl and confirmed that her romantic interest level was at 0. Confident, he concluded that all he had to do was gradually increase that value and decided to begin his strategy for getting closer to her during the next break. During the break, the young man began his approach by complimenting Marion's sword. The comment hit the mark perfectly, as the girl took great pride in the weapon she had helped create. Excited to meet someone who recognized its value, she began speaking enthusiastically, allowing the two of them to grow closer naturally. Taking advantage of the conversation, the young man praised Marion's abilities and quickly won her favor. The girl began treating him more warmly, even allowing him to call her by her first name. Realizing that he had broken the formality between them during their very first meeting, he concluded that his strategy was working even better than he had expected. While talking with Marion, the young man put his strategy into practice by encouraging her to speak about the things she excelled at the most. By listening to her achievements and sincerely praising her, he managed to strengthen the connection between them rapidly, making the girl feel increasingly comfortable in his presence. Although his relationship with Marion was progressing very well, the young man became frustrated when he realized that the expected results were not appearing. Even after gaining her trust and friendship, the effects of the curse continued to prevent her feelings from advancing, showing that winning over the 7 girls would be far more difficult than he had imagined. Upon questioning his assistant about the lack of progress, the young man discovered that the situation was far more abnormal than he had imagined. Not even she could explain why the affection level remained at 0, making it evident that the curse affecting Marion was more powerful and complicated than expected. Suspecting that Marion might not be a common case, the young man decided to test his theory with another girl from the academy. Spotting an intimidating-looking female student in the hallways, he approached her with a confident smile, ready to find out if the problem lay with Marion or with the curse itself. The next day, the young man confirmed his suspicion by testing his ability on another student. Unlike Marion, the girl fell in love instantly, and her affection level skyrocketed to the maximum. With this, he concluded that the real problem did not lie in his methods, but rather in Marion, whose condition seemed to be much more unusual than that of the other girls. After testing his abilities with several female students at the academy, the young man confirmed that they all reacted normally to his attempts to get closer. While the affection levels of the other girls increased without difficulty, Marion remained the sole exception. With this, he was certain that there was something especially wrong with her, making his mission much more complicated than he had imagined. Upon investigating deeper, the young man decided to approach Marion directly and confessed that he wanted to become someone important to her. The girl received those words positively and showed interest in strengthening the friendship between them, giving the protagonist hope of finally finding a way to break the strange barrier that prevented her feelings from advancing. While talking to Marion, the young man tried to provoke a deeper reaction by commenting on her smile. However, even in the face of an observation that would normally fluster anyone, the girl remained calm. Realizing that his usual techniques did not work on her, he concluded that he would need to find a completely different approach to win her heart. While searching for a way to get closer to Marion, the young man continued to rack his brains to understand her strange resistance. During a training session in the arena, the girl noticed that he was distracted and warned him to be careful. Even without making progress in his mission, he began to notice that Marion showed genuine concern for his well-being. During the training, the young man tried to learn by observing the other students, but his lack of experience with swords became evident. Marion quickly noticed this and did not miss the opportunity to tease him, making it clear that he was still a long way from the level of the Academy's true knights. During the training, Marion demonstrated absurd speed and completely surprised the young man with a single lunging advance. Unable to keep up with her movements, he realized the enormous difference in skill between them and concluded that his physical confidence meant nothing in the face of a true warrior. After being easily defeated during training, the young man drew Marion's attention for having managed to enter the academy despite seemingly lacking great skills with the sword. Upon observing that several other students also displayed similar difficulties, he realized that there was some secret behind his admission, sparking the girl's curiosity even further. During the training, Marion introduced the young man to the strongest student in the class, a knight known for his overwhelming strength. Upon realizing the level of that warrior, he understood that facing him alone would be practically impossible, leaving him even more impressed by the rigor and competitiveness of the academy. During an intense training session, one of the students tried to challenge the strongest knight in the class, but the difference in power became evident in just a few moments. With precise and crushing movements, the veteran completely dominated the combat, showing why he was considered the most powerful warrior in the academy. Upon witnessing the demonstration of strength by the academy's top student, the young man realized that that warrior was on a completely different level from the rest. While everyone watched in awe, Marion also showed interest in the confrontation, making it clear that the true monsters of that academy were still far above what he had imagined. While observing the academy, the young man discovered that Marion was being pressured by a powerful knight who wished to take her as his wife. Without showing any interest in the proposal, the girl rejected the idea immediately, revealing her strong personality. Upon witnessing the argument, the young man realized that that man could become a significant obstacle in his mission. While discussing the matter, Marion revealed that the knight was officially her fiancé. The engagement had been arranged by her family without giving her any choice, since her clan valued strength above all else. Although she accepted the situation out of obligation, it was clear that she felt absolutely no enthusiasm for the arranged marriage. Marion revealed that she did not want to get married, and that her true dream was to become a respected knight. For that reason, she continued rejecting the engagement and postponing the decisive confrontation. Even so, she admitted that if her suitor proved stronger than her, she would have no choice but to accept the fate her family had imposed upon her. While talking with Marion, the young man unexpectedly triggered an unusual reaction. Instead of increasing her affection, his words caused the value to drop even further, revealing that the girl seemed to develop feelings opposite to what was normal. Upon noticing this anomaly, he finally began to understand the true nature of the problem he needed to solve. The following day, the young man continued observing Marion closely and noticed that she maintained a cold and distant attitude. While trying to better understand her feelings, he began noticing small behaviors that suggested a subtle change in her attitude, giving him a new clue to unravel the mystery behind her strange condition. After analyzing the situation more carefully, the young man realized that Marion's affection value was dropping into negative numbers. Instead of panicking, he concluded that this reversed behavior might be the key to solving the problem. Remembering that she refused to fight precisely because she did not want to get married, he began formulating a new strategy to exploit that contradiction and finally make progress in his mission. Putting his new theory into practice, the young man began encouraging Marion to accept the marriage and abandon her dream of becoming a knight. The reaction was immediate and intense, with the girl rejecting those words with all her strength. Realizing that touching upon her true desires provoked a powerful emotional response, he confirmed that he was getting closer and closer to discovering how to break the curse. As he continued deliberately provoking Marion, the young man discovered something important about the curse. Whenever he suggested that she abandon her dreams and accept the arranged marriage, the girl reacted with extreme disgust. As a result, he realized that her emotions seemed to function in reverse, making it clear that the key to saving her was hidden within that very contradiction. As he continued testing his theory, the young man watched Marion's affection level plummet even further. While his assistant believed that the girl now hated him completely, he realized that such an extreme reaction only reinforced his suspicion that her emotions were functioning in a completely inverted way because of the curse. After finally understanding the nature of the curse, the young man concluded that there was no reason to despair. Convinced that Marion's feelings were simply reversed, he believed he was closer to his goal than ever before and decided to continue following his plan to make her fall in love. Even as Marion's affection level reached extremely negative values, the young man showed no concern. On the contrary, he began observing her even more carefully, convinced that his theory was correct. While Marion grew increasingly irritated by his constant presence, he viewed every exaggerated reaction as further proof that the curse was distorting her true feelings. Upon seeing Marion's affection level reach the negative limit, the little assistant panicked. However, the young man reacted in the exact opposite manner and saw it as the perfect opportunity to put his final plan into motion. Convinced that he had understood the curse, he declared that everything was ready for the next step. After preparing everything behind the scenes, the young man set the most important part of his plan into motion. In front of Marion, he provoked the powerful knight and pushed him into issuing an official duel challenge. Surprised by the sudden turn of events, the girl realized that something much bigger was about to happen. To carry out his plan, the young man deliberately provoked Marion's fiancé and questioned his position as the strongest and most worthy man for her. The strategy worked immediately, igniting the knight's fury. While Marion tried to distance herself from the situation, the protagonist realized that he had achieved exactly the reaction he wanted in order to advance his mission. The young man's provocation achieved its objective, and the powerful knight agreed to face him in an official duel 7 days later. While everyone was shocked by the decision, Marion saw her affection level fall even further, unable to understand why he was involving himself in such a dangerous conflict. Even in the face of the enormous difference in strength, the protagonist remained confident, convinced that this confrontation was essential to breaking the curse. Upon revealing his plan, the young man declared that he would fight in Marion's place to prevent the marriage she despised so much. The proposal left the girl completely stunned, unable to understand his logic. Even though he was considered far weaker than his opponent, he displayed absolute confidence, causing Marion to react more intensely than ever before. Seeing Marion desperately worried about the possibility of him getting hurt, the young man explained that even if he lost, she would still have the right to pursue her own dreams. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he made an unexpected request, that she train him for the next 7 days. Surprised by the proposal, the girl realized that he was truly willing to risk everything to help her. After agreeing to train him, Marion began a brutal week of preparation for the duel. Showing absolutely no mercy, she forced him to endure intense training and made it clear that she would not accept defeat. Despite the constant complaints and suffering, the young man realized that the girl cared about him far more than she wanted to admit. 2 days after the training began, the young man was still being subjected to an exhausting routine at Marion's hands. Even with her affection level remaining extremely negative, the girl showed no intention of easing up on the training. Even so, he realized that all that dedication and concern did not match someone who truly hated him, reinforcing his conviction that the curse was reversing Marion's true feelings. During training, Marion continued pushing the young man without rest, teaching him basic combat techniques and insisting that he make use of every remaining second before the duel. Despite trying his hardest, he realized that defeating his opponent through strength alone was practically impossible. Because of that, he concluded that he would need to rely on a different strategy to achieve his true objective. Throughout the entire week, Marion subjected the young man to relentless training to prepare him for the duel. Even exhausted and covered in wounds, he continued pushing himself without giving up. When the deadline finally came to an end, the two headed to the Bonnet family mansion, where the decisive confrontation was about to begin. On the eve of the duel, Marion reflected on everything at stake if the plan failed. Despite her doubts and worries, she acknowledged the effort the young man had made throughout the week of training. As she prepared to watch the confrontation, she began observing the situation from a different perspective, curious to discover the result of that risky gamble. On the day of the duel, a massive crowd gathered in the arena to watch the confrontation between the Academy's strongest knight and the unexpected challenger. While the opponent displayed absolute confidence and treated everything as a mere formality, the protagonist remained calm and analyzed the situation. Upon noticing that the arena had magical protections to prevent fatal injuries, he confirmed his true objective. He did not need to win, only to avoid defeat. As soon as the duel began, the protagonist put into practice everything he had learned during the week of training and advanced without hesitation. Taking advantage of the opening instant, he launched a surprise attack that came dangerously close to striking his opponent. Although the charge narrowly failed, it achieved something unexpected. For the first time, the powerful knight was forced to take the fight seriously and realized that his opponent would not be defeated so easily. After nearly being struck right at the beginning of the fight, the powerful knight became furious at having been pressured by someone so inferior. Consumed by anger, he went on the attack, while Marion watched the situation with great concern. After being knocked down with ease, the protagonist achieved exactly what he wanted, enraging his opponent. Irritated, the knight decided to prolong the fight to make him suffer, while the young man remained conscious and satisfied that his plan was working. Even while being completely overwhelmed in terms of power, the protagonist continued avoiding his opponent's attacks and enduring the pressure. As he retreated, he analyzed the rules of the fight and realized that he only needed to survive, keeping the knight irritated and preventing the decisive blow from landing. While being constantly struck and humiliated before the entire arena, the protagonist remained firm in his true objective, restoring Marion's feelings. Even though it seemed like a one-sided battle in the eyes of the crowd, he continued resisting without giving up, making Marion begin to see his determination in a different way. Even while acknowledging that he had no real chance of winning, the protagonist continued fighting without retreating. As his opponent mocked his motivations, he realized that the knight was much faster than he appeared, and that he would need to endure even longer to execute his true plan. While the knight continued attacking mercilessly, the protagonist endured the blows and realized that his opponent was enjoying his suffering. The crowd began demanding the end of the fight, but he refused to give up. Seeing that irrational determination, Marion began questioning the true motives behind his actions. Even covered in injuries, the protagonist refused to fall and remained standing before everyone. His persistence began awakening the sympathy of the audience and, most importantly, Marion, who instinctively began cheering for him. Without realizing it, the girl was being influenced by the determination of that man who continued fighting against all odds. Upon realizing that Marion was cheering for him, the protagonist understood that his plan was finally beginning to bear fruit. As he continued enduring the attacks, the girl became increasingly confused by her own feelings. Unable to ignore the concern she felt, she ended up shouting his name before the entire arena. Upon hearing Marion cheer for his victory, the protagonist achieved exactly the result he had been seeking. The conflict between the girl's feelings and the curse that made her hate him created such a great contradiction that the effect began to unravel instantly. Before everyone's eyes, Marion's affection level skyrocketed, leaving even Jibril shocked by how quickly the change occurred. At the moment, Marion's feelings returned completely. She began encouraging the protagonist with all her strength. The distraction caused by the girl's reaction created the opening he had been waiting for, allowing him to launch his most powerful attack. Taking advantage of the opportunity created by his own plan, he finally managed to strike his opponent for the first time before the entire arena. With a single blow, the protagonist managed to knock down the powerful knight and won the duel unexpectedly. The entire arena was stunned by the result, while the crowd celebrated the favorite's fall. For him, however, the victory was only a bonus, since his true objective had already been achieved when Marion recovered her feelings. Right after the victory, Marion ran to the protagonist and embraced him in front of everyone, unable to hide her true feelings. The sudden change left Jibril completely confused, since the girl's affection had jumped from the extreme negative to the maximum positive in an instant. While they tried to understand what had happened, Marion showed that she was now completely in love with him. After the duel ended, the protagonist explained that everything had happened because of a psychological effect known as the Franklin effect. By making Marion repeatedly act in his favor and cheer for his victory, he created a contradiction between her actions and the negative feelings caused by the curse. Unable to maintain that inconsistency, the girl's mind adjusted her emotions to match her actions, causing her love to return all at once. After revealing his strategy, the protagonist explained that he had pushed Marion's affection to the extreme negative in order to trigger a psychological reaction capable of restoring her true feelings. Although everything had been a risky gamble, the plan worked perfectly. While Jibril admired his genius, Marion tearfully thanked him for fighting so hard to save her. After recovering her feelings, Marion could no longer contain her emotions and kissed the protagonist in front of the entire arena. The unexpected act left everyone around them completely shocked, especially the young man himself, who had not expected such a direct display. Then, the girl revealed that it had been her first kiss, making the moment even more embarrassing for both of them. After the kiss, Marion revealed without any hesitation that she considered the protagonist her future husband, leaving him completely speechless. To her, sharing her first kiss with the person she loved was something natural, but for the young man, the situation became increasingly chaotic. Before he could object, The girl embraced him again and declared that she would not accept going back on her decision. Upon realizing the intensity of Marion's feelings, the protagonist began regretting having taken his plan so far. While the girl was already speaking seriously about marriage and a future together, he understood that he had created a situation much bigger than he had expected. Now, in addition to helping her escape the forced engagement, he would need to deal with a Marion who was completely in love and determined not to let him escape. After the victory in the duel, the protagonist tried to find a way to deal with Marion, whose affection had reached the maximum level. While he was still uncomfortable with the situation, the girl began calling him in increasingly intimate ways, making it clear that her feelings were stronger than ever. Upon realizing the consequences of his own plan, he began to understand that the true challenge was only beginning. After the duel, Marion began showing her love without any shame, constantly staying by the protagonist's side and trying to get closer to him in every possible way. While she openly praised him and flirted non-stop, the young man struggled to maintain his composure. With each passing moment, it became clearer that the girl's feelings had completely surpassed the point he had planned for. Even while trying to act normally, the protagonist continued suffering from Marion's excessive attention, as she made no effort to hide her feelings. As rumors about the two spread throughout the academy, the young woman reminded everyone that she had defeated her powerful suitor through the protagonist's victory. Little by little, he realized that escaping that situation would be much harder than he had imagined. Marion began acting as though the relationship between the two of them was already official, constantly staying beside the protagonist and driving away any potential rivals. While the entire academy observed the situation in surprise, she displayed her affection without the slightest shame. The protagonist, meanwhile, tried to deal with the consequences of his plan, realizing that the girl was becoming increasingly possessive and determined to keep him by her side. While the protagonist tried to point out the flaws in his own personality to make Marion reconsider her feelings, the girl completely ignored every criticism. To her, none of that mattered compared to how much she admired and loved the young man. In the end, Marion concluded that his flaws were insignificant beside his qualities, leaving the protagonist with no arguments to escape her persistence. Marion began completely monopolizing the protagonist's attention, claiming that he was now the center of her world. While he complained about the exaggeration, the girl explained that young nobles usually competed for the best marriage candidates, and that someone with his achievements would certainly attract many suitors. Determined not to lose ground to any possible rivals, Marion made it clear that she intended to remain as close to him as possible. While searching for a way to make the Bonnet family accept the relationship, Marion revealed that her father greatly admired strong men like McAllister. Convinced that strength alone would not be enough to resolve the situation, she suggested an unexpected method to guarantee her family's approval. Upon hearing the idea, the protagonist immediately realized that it would probably bring even more problems into his life. While Marion grew increasingly excited about the idea of a future beside the protagonist, he desperately tried to slow down her imagination before she started planning marriage and children. Despite that, the young woman admitted that she was excited by the possibility, showing sincere happiness. The situation drew the attention of an instructor, who noticed the change in their relationship and decided to interrupt the conversation to begin the next training session. After training, Marion invited the protagonist to spend some time together outside the academy. When he suggested a date, the girl became extremely excited upon realizing that it would be her first real date. Unable to hide her happiness, she immediately accepted the idea and began seeing that simple moment as another major step in their relationship. During their first date, Marion showed contagious excitement as she explored the capital alongside the protagonist. Running from one place to another and becoming fascinated by everything she saw, she seemed to enjoy every second of that new experience. Watching her sincere joy and more innocent side, the protagonist began to see her as even more adorable, while the two enjoyed the outing together. During the date, Marion enjoyed every moment beside the protagonist, trying foods, visiting shops, and exploring the city with great enthusiasm. As the two walked through the capital, she showed genuine happiness over the smallest things, making the young man realize how much that outing meant to her. Between conversations and impressive scenery, the two continued growing closer and closer. As they observed the beautiful city scenery at the end of the date, Marion revealed how much fun she had that day. Happy to see her smiling, the protagonist decided to give her a small gift as a memento of that special moment. Surprised and moved by the unexpected gesture, the girl was left speechless as she realized the date was becoming even more unforgettable. The protagonist gifted Marion an accessory she had admired during the outing. Moved by the gesture, The girl approached him without hesitation and asked him to put it on her himself. After receiving the gift, Marion made sure to stay even closer to the protagonist while he helped her put it on. Happy and emotional, she thanked him for the gesture and used the opportunity to move closer to him, leaving the young man increasingly flustered by so much affection. During the date, Marion reflected on her feelings and realized that falling in love was far more pleasant and comforting than she had imagined. As he watched the girl happily beside him, the protagonist simply accompanied her in silence, seeing how much she was enjoying that moment. At the end of the date, Marion said goodbye to the protagonist with a radiant smile and returned home extremely happy. Observing her reaction, he realized that the outing had been a great success. While Jibril praised him for the result, the protagonist began to believe that his plan was finally working. After the date, Jibril explained that those happy memories would make Marion remember the protagonist whenever her feelings resurfaced. As he evaluated the results of his plan, the young man realized that there were still other possibilities for the future. In silence, he began reflecting on which path he should follow from that point onward. Upon seeing the protagonist once again finish at the top of the class with a huge advantage over the other students, a young girl began to admire him deeply. While other students criticized him or felt jealous of his talent, she saw his dedication and strength as something inspiring. From that moment on, she decided to change her own way of thinking and began observing him with different eyes. After reaching the top of the school through his tireless effort, the protagonist began drawing the attention of everyone around him. During the entrance ceremony, his appearance and reputation awakened the admiration of several female students, while one girl in particular watched his transformation with fascination, realizing how much he had changed since the past. At school, the protagonist became extremely popular among the students, thanks to his appearance, charisma, and social skills. Constantly surrounded by admirers, he even shared relationship advice and easily captured the girl's attention. Even so, all that popularity did not matter much to him, as he remained focused on his own goals. After years of striving to change himself, the protagonist finally gathered the courage to confess his feelings to the girl he loved. Convinced that she was the person destined for him, he decided to reveal everything he felt and ask for a chance to be together. To him, all the effort and transformation he had gone through up to that moment had been because of her. Even surrounded by success and affection, the protagonist realized that this world was not the place where he truly wanted to stay. As he reflected on his future, Jibril asked whether he was certain of his decision, and he confirmed that he would continue pursuing his own objective. During team training, Marion faced 3 opponents at the same time and displayed her overwhelming strength. With fast and precise movements, she defeated all of her opponents without much difficulty, impressing the spectators and reaffirming her position as one of the Academy's most talented fighters. After breaking off her engagement with McAllister, Marion began acting much lighter and happier. While her classmates commented on the sudden change, she continued smiling beside the protagonist, making it clear that she was finally living the way she wanted. As he silently said goodbye, the protagonist decided to move forward and leave that world behind. However, Marion had a strange feeling when she heard his farewell, as though she had heard something important. As she looked at the pendant she had received, she began feeling that something was different, while Jibril realized that an unexpected change was about to happen. After saying goodbye to Marion, the protagonist decided to leave for his next objective. Guided by Jibril, he headed to a large port city, where he would meet the next girl connected to his mission. As they talked about the new target, the story introduced a young beastkin receptionist named Lily Fafner, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in his journey. Upon arriving in the port city of Kurtberg, the protagonist searched for information about his next target. During the investigation, he also learned more about beastmen, discovering that they were a rare race in that region and suffered prejudice in some places, despite originally living in the mountainous areas of the north. The protagonist discovered that his target had caught the attention of the local guildmaster and had been brought to the city. After analyzing the situation, he concluded that the mission might be simpler than he had expected, especially when he noticed that the young woman currently had no adventurer duties assigned to her. While investigating his target, the protagonist discovered that she was known as the feared Lady of Death, an adventurer surrounded by rumors and tragedies. Even while acknowledging her abilities, he concluded that her current situation made her a more vulnerable and easier target to approach. After laying out his plan, the protagonist began approaching his target and headed to the place where she was staying. Observing the situation from a distance, he finally found the young beastkin woman and began evaluating the best way to place her within his strategy. Upon finding the beast woman he was looking for, the protagonist realized that she worked at the Adventurers Guild in Kurtberg. As he observed the young woman up close, he introduced himself as a newly arrived adventurer and used the opportunity to approach her without raising suspicion. During his registration at the guild, the protagonist took the opportunity to ask that the beast woman be responsible for attending to him. His unexpected request surprised the guild employees, especially the young woman he had chosen, immediately drawing the attention of everyone around them. While trying to get closer to the beast woman, the protagonist used a bold excuse to justify his choice. His attitude left the guild employees flustered and embarrassed, but he quickly revealed that he was only joking, keeping the atmosphere light while continuing his plan to approach her. While gathering information at the guild, the protagonist discovered that the beast woman carried a terrible reputation. Known as the Lady of Death, she was considered cursed, since all the adventurers placed under her responsibility ended up dying, which explained why so many people avoided approaching her. Even after hearing the warnings about the receptionist's supposed curse, the protagonist did not let himself be intimidated. Convinced that he could break that cycle of misfortune, he ignored the advice of the other adventurers and moved forward with his decision, awakening surprise and outrage among those who tried to stop him. Despite the dark reputation surrounding the beast woman, the protagonist insisted on choosing her as the person responsible for him at the guild. Unshaken by the warnings about the curse, he displayed absolute confidence in his own survival and convinced the young woman to accept the partnership, beginning a relationship that no one believed would end well. After accepting the protagonist's proposal, the beast woman began his registration at the guild, still suspicious of his exaggerated confidence. As the two formalized their partnership, the adventurers watching the scene remained convinced that this relationship would end in the same tragic way as all the previous ones. After completing the registration, the protagonist said goodbye and analyzed the beast woman with a special ability. To his surprise, he discovered that her affection level had increased, indicating that his approach strategy was working better than expected. Upon observing the increase in the beast woman's affection, the protagonist became intrigued, since similar experiences in the past had not produced the same result. Analyzing the situation, he concluded that he had awakened the young woman's sympathy almost without realizing it, confirming that his approach was progressing in a promising way. Reflecting on the success of his approach, the protagonist concluded that he had earned the beast woman's trust by showing that he valued her more than others did. Comparing the situation with past experiences, he realized that his strategy was working perfectly, although his companions still questioned whether he truly knew what he was doing. After securing the partnership with the beast woman, the protagonist was pleased to see that her affection continued increasing. He then decided to begin his first mission in the city, choosing a simple herb-gathering task, while his companions watched his actions with curiosity and confusion. By choosing a simple herb-gathering mission, the protagonist refused any shortcut that could make the work easier. His goal was not only to complete the task, but also to earn the beast woman's trust, believing that sincerity and effort would be essential to strengthen the relationship between them. The following day, while the protagonist carried out his first mission, the beast woman continued dealing with the prejudice and distrust of the people around her. Even though she believed her presence brought misfortune to adventurers, she could not forget the protagonist's confident words and began reconsidering her decision to keep others at a distance. While they waited for the result of the mission, many still doubted the protagonist because of his lack of experience and because he had chosen such a simple task. However, to everyone's surprise, he quickly returned after completing the job, leaving the beast woman impressed and beginning to change the way she saw him. After returning from the mission, the protagonist was received by a worried beast woman who feared that something had happened to him. Upon discovering that he had completed the task without any injuries, she showed sincere relief, further strengthening the bond between the two. Upon seeing the beast woman's genuine concern, the protagonist realized that she was already deeply emotionally invested in his well-being. Surprised by how quickly this change had happened, he tried to understand the reason for so much affection, while the young woman remained relieved to see him return safe and sound from the mission. Noticing the beast woman's strong reaction after his return, the protagonist began to suspect that there was something more behind her concern. Determined to better understand the young woman's feelings, he approached her and began a direct conversation to discover what was really happening. After noticing the beast woman's concern, the protagonist decided to get even closer to her. Using the excuse that he wanted to talk in private, he invited her to have dinner together, leaving the young woman surprised and embarrassed, while the relationship between the two continued advancing rapidly. After accepting the dinner invitation, the Beast Woman showed a sincere and relaxed smile for the first time. While waiting for the mission to be concluded, the protagonist realized that everything was happening according to his plan, convinced that the growing closeness between them was not the result of chance. While waiting for dinner, the protagonist revealed that he had used several strategies to earn the Beast Woman's trust. As he explained his reasoning, he showed that each of his actions had been carefully planned to bring her closer to him and strengthen the bond between them. While waiting for the date, the protagonist realized that the Beast Woman's affection continued increasing. Shortly afterward, she appeared ready for dinner, leaving him momentarily impressed by her appearance, and making it clear that the relationship between the two was becoming increasingly close. During dinner, the protagonist and the Beast Woman spent more time together and talked in a relaxed atmosphere. The young woman gradually lowered her guard and showed sincere smiles, while the two strengthened their connection. By the end of the night, they walked together through the city, making their relationship even closer. After dinner, the protagonist realized that his approach had been a great success. The Beast Woman's affection increased drastically, reaching a much higher level than he had expected. As the two walked together through the city, it became clear that the young woman already trusted him far more than anyone else. The next morning, the protagonist realized that his strategy had worked better than expected after the success of the dinner. Convinced that he was very close to completely winning the Beast Woman's trust, he returned to the guild, believing that the next step of his plan would be even easier. Upon returning to the guild the following day, the protagonist was warmly welcomed by the Beast Woman. However, when he checked his appraisal ability, he was shocked to discover that her affection level had suddenly plummeted, turning his confidence into complete confusion. Realizing that the guild employee's affection level had returned to zero, the protagonist became confused and tried to understand the reason behind that sudden change. As he analyzed the situation, he discovered that the girl was connected to an already completed dungeon, and that, without her constant presence, monsters could begin appearing there again. After analyzing the sudden drop in the guild employee's affection level, the protagonist concluded that proximity between them was the main factor influencing their relationship. As he reflected on how to solve the problem, he noticed that the girl seemed to want to say something important, but hesitated to reveal her true feelings. While trying to understand the drop in affection level, the protagonist concluded that the guild employee had low self-esteem and tended to think negatively whenever she was alone. Seeing her continue to worry about his safety, even after the dungeon had been cleared, he began to see her as an extremely dedicated and hardworking person. When the guild employee saw the protagonist considering entering the dungeon again, she became desperate and showed all of her concern. Through tears, she insisted that his safety was more important than any achievement, making it clear that she would rather see him return alive, even if he failed or had to run away. Seeing the sincerity of those feelings, the protagonist was surprised by how much she cared about him. After hearing the guild employee's sincere concern, the protagonist promised that he would return safely. With that, she finally calmed down and sent him off with a smile, wishing him caution during the mission. As he left the guild, the protagonist headed toward his next challenge, carrying with him the support and trust he had earned. While heading toward his next mission, the protagonist reflected on the strange affection system he had been observing. Comparing the reactions of the people around him, he realized that each individual expressed their feelings differently, making every case unique and difficult to fully understand. While analyzing the patterns of the affection system, the protagonist noticed that each person reacted differently to his presence. Comparing the cases he knew, he concluded that one person's affection increased steadily, while another's fluctuated rapidly whenever she was alone, making it impossible to apply the same strategy to everyone. As he reflected on the differences between the people around him, the protagonist concluded that each one had their own desires and motivations. Realizing that the guild employee showed interest in spending more time with him, he decided that the best way to increase her affection would be to strengthen the bond between them, even without knowing exactly how he would do it. While heading toward the dungeon, the protagonist admitted that he did not like the idea of killing monsters, especially because he came from a peaceful world where almost no one had experience with real combat. Comparing that reality with the reincarnation stories he knew, he realized how different it was to face real creatures, while his companion watched his reaction with curiosity. Upon arriving at the dungeon entrance, the protagonist found the place already explored and protected by guild warnings. As he descended to the first floors, he discovered that only goblins appeared in that area, and was surprised to see that the interior was well lit, thanks to magical tools installed after the place had been cleared. While exploring the dungeon corridors, the protagonist moved forward distractedly, observing the environment around him. Without realizing it, he ended up approaching a huge hidden pit in the path, but he was warned in time by his companion and managed to avoid a fall that could have been disastrous. While investigating an already triggered trap inside the dungeon, the protagonist concluded that someone had fallen there before. As he analyzed the place, his companion used her excellent vision to identify two goblins farther ahead, allowing them to continue exploring cautiously. Upon finding two goblins in the dungeon corridors, the protagonist decided to face the creatures directly to test his abilities. Even nervous about participating in real combat for the first time, he advanced without hesitation and defeated the monsters with quick sword strikes, successfully winning the confrontation. After defeating the goblins, the protagonist realized that the battle had been more exhausting than he expected. As he caught his breath, his companion detected someone approaching through the dungeon corridors, causing both of them to immediately go on alert before the new threat appearing ahead. Upon hearing footsteps coming from different directions, the protagonist realized that he was not alone inside the dungeon. Surprised by the presence of other people in the place, he concluded that someone was carrying out the same monster extermination mission, increasing his curiosity even more about who could be exploring those depths. Following the sounds inside the dungeon, the protagonist ended up surrounded by hooded figures emerging from the corridors. Realizing that those individuals did not seem like ordinary adventurers and were acting suspiciously, he became alert, trying to discover who they were and what they were doing in that place. During the confrontation, the protagonist realized that the hooded figures were fighting to truly kill him. Surrounded by several enemies and clearly outnumbered, he began carefully analyzing the situation, trying to discover the attacker's objective before deciding whether he should keep fighting or find a way to escape. Realizing that he could not win a prolonged fight against so many enemies, the protagonist devised a risky plan. With his companion's help, he identified an opening in the hooded figure's formation and charged forward with everything he had, knocking down one opponent and breaking through the encirclement. Taking advantage of the confusion created by the surprise attack, he opened a path to escape that dangerous situation. After breaking through the hooded figure's encirclement, the protagonist sprinted through the dungeon corridors while being pursued by the enemies. Guided by his companion, he ran toward a trap they had previously identified, and at the exact moment, jumped over the huge pit. Trusting the plan until the end, he tried to use the terrain to his advantage to shake off the pursuers still chasing him. When executing his plan, the protagonist deceived the pursuers and disappeared from their sight, making the hooded figures believe he had fallen into the trap. In reality, he and his companion activated a hidden teleportation spell at the location and were transported to an unknown room, narrowly escaping a situation that had seemed hopeless. After escaping the hooded figures through teleportation, the protagonist and his companion reappeared in an inn in the city. Relieved to have survived the pursuit, the two realized that they had managed to leave the dungeon at the very last moment, ending an escape that had almost ended in disaster. After narrowly escaping death, the protagonist reflected that his lack of combat experience had almost cost him his life. When his companion questioned why he had not used teleportation immediately, he realized that he still needed to learn how to make better decisions in extreme situations before his luck ran out. After surviving the ambush and disappearing from the enemy's sight, the protagonist realized that everyone would believe he had died in the trap. At the same time, a new idea formed in his mind: to take advantage of his supposed death to get even closer to the guild employee, believing that the incident could increase the feelings she had for him. The next morning, while adventurers talked about failed missions and recent deaths, the Beast Woman was once again consumed by pessimism. Convinced that the same fate awaited the protagonist, she believed that she would soon be left alone again, unable to free herself from the guilt and sadness she had carried for so long. The following day, the protagonist returned to the guild alive and unharmed, surprising all the adventurers who had expected yet another tragedy. Observing the reactions to his return, he noticed that some people seemed especially bothered by his survival. While the Beast Woman emotionally celebrated seeing him return safely, the protagonist began to suspect that those responsible for the rumors and incidents involving her might be much closer than he had imagined. Upon reuniting with the protagonist after a long absence, the Beast Woman could not contain her emotions and broke down in tears. The fear that he had suffered the same fate as the other adventurers had consumed her the entire time, and his safe return brought her immense relief. Seeing her so worried, the protagonist finally realized how attached she had become to him. After calming the Beast Woman and assuring her that he was fine, the protagonist revealed that he had discovered something important during his absence. Convinced that the guild was hiding crucial information, he decided to report his findings to someone influential. While the young woman was still trying to recover from the shock and relief of seeing him alive, some people nearby began to grow uneasy about the direction the situation was taking. When he asked to speak with the guildmaster, the protagonist made the beast woman visibly nervous. Not understanding his true motives, she feared that something serious was happening. As she hurried to fulfill his request, the protagonist remained focused on his plan, unaware that the young woman was already interpreting his actions in a far more personal way than he imagined. While waiting to speak with the guildmaster, the protagonist stirred the concern of some adventurers who were hiding secrets and feared being exposed. Convinced that he had noticed something suspicious, they began to panic. At the same time, the beast woman returned to lead him to the meeting that could finally reveal the truth behind the entire conspiracy. The protagonist was finally taken to the office of Kurtberg's guildmaster. Before the city's experienced leader and his secretary, he got straight to the point, ready to reveal everything he had discovered and begin the investigation that could change the beast woman's fate. Before the guildmaster and his secretary, the protagonist ignored formalities and went straight to the matter at hand. Surprising everyone with his firm attitude, he revealed that he had discovered something important and had a specific reason for seeking them out. Determined to expose the truth, he prepared to present the information he had gathered during his investigation. When he finally exposed his conclusions, the protagonist directly accused the guildmaster of incompetence for ignoring the problems happening right before his eyes. His statement shocked everyone in the room, especially the beast woman and the secretary, while the master reacted with surprise at the audacity of that young adventurer. The protagonist revealed to the guildmaster that he had been attacked by adventurers inside the dungeon the previous day. Upon hearing the accusation, everyone was shocked, especially the beast woman, who had no idea what had happened. Convinced that there was a conspiracy behind those incidents, he began presenting the evidence he had gathered during his investigation. As he continued his accusation, the protagonist explained that the attack itself was not the real problem. As a novice adventurer with no known enemies, he saw no reason why he would have been chosen as a target. This inconsistency led him to conclude that there was something far more suspicious behind the incident, drawing the guildmaster's attention to the real issue he was about to reveal. The protagonist revealed his true suspicion. The adventurers were not dying because of bad luck, but because someone was deliberately eliminating them in order to blame the beast woman and reinforce her reputation as the Lady of Death. The accusation completely shocked the guildmaster, his secretary, and the young woman herself. The protagonist stated that someone harbored a deep resentment toward the beast woman and was intentionally destroying her reputation. Outraged by the situation, he accused the guild of ignoring her suffering and demanded an explanation regarding who had transferred her to that city, placing everyone in the room under pressure. Upon hearing the protagonist's theory, the guildmaster admitted that it made sense. While the beast woman became emotional upon realizing that someone finally believed in her, the protagonist went further and questioned the true motive behind the persecution, seeking to discover who was manipulating the entire situation. When pressured to identify a culprit, the protagonist replied that discovering the person responsible was the guild's job. Instead of providing a name, he demanded that the suspects be investigated and captured. His attitude irritated the secretary and left everyone tense, while the beast woman watched the argument without knowing how to react. The protagonist explained that arresting the adventurers responsible for the attacks would not be enough, as they were merely disposable pawns. While the secretary reacted angrily to his accusations, the guildmaster began seriously considering the possibility that someone far more influential was manipulating everything from behind the scenes. After identifying one of the individuals involved in the attacks, the protagonist helped the guild establish a suspect who should be monitored. Then, concerned about his own safety while the investigation progressed, he made an unexpected request. He wanted a safe place to hide until the true culprits were captured. After securing a hideout from the guild, the protagonist made one final unexpected request. He wanted the beast woman herself to take care of him during that period. The request left the young woman completely surprised and the secretary outraged, but the protagonist stood by his decision, using the investigation as another opportunity to remain close to her. The protagonist insisted that the beast woman stay by his side, arguing that he was trying to protect her from potential dangers during the investigation. Despite the suspicions of those present, he assured them that his intentions were sincere, leaving the young woman surprised by how much he was willing to risk for her. By defending the protagonist in front of everyone, the beast woman declared that she trusted him completely, causing her affection level to increase once again. Faced with this display of trust, the guildmaster accepted the request and ordered the necessary preparations to be made, allowing the two of them to remain together while the investigation continued. Before leaving, the protagonist corrected his own words and stated that the guildmaster was not incompetent, but simply overlooking something important. Shortly afterward, the scene shifted to a forest, where mysterious figures moved in secret, suggesting that the true culprits behind the incidents were still operating in the shadows while the investigation advanced. While traveling together, the protagonist struggled to ride a horse and became the target of the secretary's teasing. Trying to defend himself, he explained that in his previous life he had never had the opportunity to learn such a skill. Meanwhile, the little fairy also mocked the situation, but the conversation soon took another turn when the secretary questioned the beast woman about allowing him to travel so close to her, leaving the young woman visibly embarrassed. Upon arriving at the hideout prepared by the guild, the group found an isolated and well-stocked house where they could spend the next several days. The secretary explained that the location contained food, water, and everything they would need during the investigation. While the protagonist evaluated the shelter's conditions, the beast woman appeared pleased that she would be able to remain safely by his side. Before departing, the secretary gave the protagonist a direct warning. If he attempted to do anything to the beast woman, the entire guild would hunt him down without hesitation. Even after making the threat, she continued showing concern for the young woman's safety. Once the secretary left, the protagonist realized just how protective she was, while the beast woman explained that this was because she was highly respected within the guild. After the secretary's departure, the beast woman entered the house to inspect the place, while the protagonist reflected on everything that had happened. Alone with his spiritual companion, he was questioned about why he had provoked the guildmaster so aggressively. Although he maintained a confident appearance, it became clear that his behavior was part of a larger plan he had not yet revealed. While explaining his actions, the protagonist revealed that the entire argument with the guild had one simple purpose: convincing the beast woman to agree to hide away with him. According to his reasoning, very few people would agree to live in isolation besides someone with whom they did not even have a relationship, making it necessary to create circumstances that would lead her to accept the proposal of her own free will. The protagonist revealed that he was carefully manipulating the beast woman's emotions to increase her closeness to him. Taking advantage of the fact that she had started with virtually no affection toward him, he created situations in which he appeared to need help and protection, awakening feelings of obligation and reciprocity within her. In this way, he managed to make her accept a request she would normally refuse, bringing the two of them increasingly closer as his plan progressed. While exploring the hideout, the beast woman began organizing the house and noticed that it was quite dusty. However, upon finding the master bedroom, she discovered an unexpected problem. There was only a single bed available. Faced with that awkward situation, the young woman became nervous and worried, unsure of how she and the protagonist would solve the problem of living together over the coming days. After the beast woman's strange behavior the previous day, the protagonist discovered that she had become extremely nervous because of the dinner. Embarrassed and unsure how to act around him, the young woman tried to hide her feelings, but only ended up making the atmosphere even more awkward. Even so, the two continued spending time together, while the closeness between them kept growing. While trying to act normally after dinner, the beast woman became increasingly aware of the protagonist's presence. Alone with her thoughts, she found herself overwhelmed by embarrassment and nervousness, unable to control the emotions that were emerging within her. At the same time, the protagonist remained nearby, unaware of the intensity of the feelings she was beginning to develop for him. As the beast woman became increasingly conscious of the closeness between them, the protagonist tried to figure out how to strengthen their relationship even further. Convinced that spending more time together was the most natural path forward, he began planning his next moves, unaware of how emotionally invested the young woman already was. While reflecting on his next steps, the protagonist concluded that increasing the beast woman's affection did not depend solely on spending time beside her. Instead, he believed that the frequency of interactions and the creation of memorable moments were far more important for strengthening a relationship, leading him to adjust his strategy once again. While thinking of a way to further increase their closeness, the protagonist began losing sight of his true objective. The beast woman quickly reminded him of the mission they were undertaking, causing him to refocus on the investigation and the plans to find the person responsible for the events they were facing. During a more serious conversation, the beast woman revealed the burden she carried from believing that all the tragedies around her were her fault. Upon hearing her confession, the protagonist showed understanding and assured her that he had no intention of allowing her to suffer any further, causing the young woman to begin believing that he genuinely cared about her. During the conversation, the Beast Woman revealed that she believed she was rejected primarily because of her origins. However, the protagonist disagreed with that conclusion and began reflecting on the true reasons behind the suffering she faced, convinced that there was something far deeper behind the situation. The protagonist explained that prejudice against beastmen was merely a form of discrimination and did not define a person's worth. To him, the most important thing was judging each individual for who they truly were. His words caused the Beast Woman to reconsider everything she believed about herself and view the situation from a different perspective. The protagonist rejected the idea that the Beast Woman was responsible for the tragedies around her simply because of her race. Instead, he believed that the true cause was hidden elsewhere and that she was being far too harsh on herself. His words eased some of the guilt she had carried for so long, causing her to consider for the first time that she might not be the source of all those problems. The protagonist tried to convince the Beast Woman that she was not responsible for the misfortunes surrounding her. In his view, evil came from people's choices, not from her existence. By telling her that she could live normally and be happy just like anyone else, he succeeded in making her see herself in a much more positive light. After their sincere conversation, the Beast Woman began feeling more comfortable around the protagonist. Noticing that she was still wet, he showed concern for her health and tried to help her in a practical way. The unexpected gesture made the young woman happy and even more comfortable in his company, strengthening the bond forming between them. During a moment of closeness, the protagonist accidentally did something that, among beastmen, carried a far more intimate meaning than he realized. The young woman's immediate and deeply embarrassed reaction revealed just how sensitive she had already become to his presence, leaving the protagonist completely surprised when he realized that he had unintentionally crossed an important boundary between them. After the misunderstanding, the protagonist apologized repeatedly, while the Beast Woman, overwhelmed by embarrassment, tried to explain that she did not blame him. Although she understood that everything had been an accident, the awkwardness shook the relationship between them, causing her affection level to drop considerably and leaving the protagonist frustrated as he watched part of his progress disappear in an instant. After the embarrassment caused by the misunderstanding, the protagonist realized that he still had a great deal of work ahead of him to regain the Beast Woman's trust. Determined not to give up, he began thinking of new ways to get closer to her, while the young woman, now calmer, started participating in the conversation and helping him find ways to strengthen the relationship between them. Seeking to recover the trust he had lost, the protagonist asked the Beast Woman for help choosing something she liked to eat. After discovering her preferences, he decided to take responsibility for preparing that evening's dinner, turning the meal into yet another opportunity to get closer to her and strengthen the bond between them. Trying to impress the Beast Woman and recover the points he had lost in their relationship, the protagonist volunteered to prepare dinner. However, despite all his confidence, his cooking skills proved disastrous, turning the meal into a complete catastrophe and leaving everyone around speechless at the result. Despite the disaster in the kitchen, the Beast Woman tried to comfort the protagonist and even found a positive side to the situation. While everyone reacted to the completely burned dinner, he interpreted the moment as an unexpected opportunity to get even closer to her, believing that everything was still proceeding according to his plans. After the failure in the kitchen, the protagonist admitted that he had tried to impress the Beast Woman and had ended up overdoing it. To his surprise, she did not judge him for it, and instead reassured him, saying that everyone makes mistakes. Seeing that her affection continued to increase even after that disaster, he concluded that his efforts to get closer to her were still producing positive results. Even after the disastrous dinner, the protagonist remained convinced that everything was part of his strategy. With almost excessive confidence, he insisted that he understood perfectly how to win someone over, leaving his companion incredulous at such self-assurance, while the relationship between him and the Beast Woman continued progressing. While explaining his strategy, the protagonist claimed that showing imperfections could make a person seem more approachable and generate greater empathy. Taking the Beast Woman's low self-esteem into account, he believed that appearing flawed would be more effective than trying to act perfect. Although his logic seemed absurd to others, he remained convinced that this approach was helping strengthen the relationship between them. While explaining his theory about relationships, the protagonist argued that showing flaws could bring people closer together than appearing perfect all the time. Convinced that his strategy was working, he ignored his companion's criticisms and continued moving forward with his plans. believing that he was getting closer and closer to completely earning the Beast Woman's trust. Realizing that the protagonist had become lost in his own plans, the Beast Woman enthusiastically offered to help him. Grateful for her support, he praised her dedication and began trusting her even more. While the young woman was happy to finally be useful to someone who treated her with such consideration. While explaining his strategy, the protagonist concluded that demonstrating vulnerability could awaken the Beast Woman's protective instincts. Taking advantage of the low self-esteem she carried, he believed that his small failures made her feel closer to him and more needed, further strengthening the bond between them. As he continued putting his strategy into practice, the protagonist saw results appear once again. The Beast Woman began showing increasingly sincere smiles, and her affection level continued rising. As they shared simple moments together, it became clear that she already felt comfortable and happy by his side, drawing closer and closer to him. Upon realizing that there was only one bed available, the protagonist immediately tried to act respectfully and offered it to the Beast Woman. However, the young woman felt uncomfortable with the idea of him sleeping on the floor. Even though both tried to maintain their distance and act appropriately, they found themselves facing an embarrassing situation that made the atmosphere between them even more delicate. With no better options available, the Beast Woman gathered her courage and suggested that they share the same bed. Despite the overwhelming embarrassment, she trusted the protagonist and believed that nothing inappropriate would happen. Even so, the situation left both of them extremely nervous, turning that simple night of rest into yet another memorable moment in the growing closeness between them. That night, the two ended up sharing the same bed for the first time. While the protagonist fell asleep peacefully, the Beast Woman remained awake and completely nervous because of the unexpected proximity. Unable to relax, she spent the night struggling against her embarrassment and the increasingly powerful feelings that were beginning to grow within her heart. Unable to sleep during the night, the Beast Woman remained awake, watching the protagonist rest peacefully. While dealing with her own thoughts and anxieties, she was surprised to see how he could sleep so deeply without worrying about anything around him. As she approached the sleeping protagonist, the Beast Woman was overcome by curiosity and increasingly intense emotions. However, before she could do anything impulsive, he suddenly woke up, leaving her completely embarrassed and at a loss for words. After the awkward moment, the Beast Woman hurried away to compose herself and prepare breakfast. While she tried to hide her embarrassment, the protagonist remained calm, explaining that his composure was the result of special training that allowed him to sleep deeply in any situation. While observing the results of his ability, the protagonist noticed that the Beast Woman's affection decreased whenever she moved away from him. After analyzing this information, he concluded that maintaining constant proximity could be a simple way to strengthen their relationship, leading him to consider new ways to deepen their connection even further. After confirming that the Beast Woman's affection had increased, the protagonist was pleased with the results of his actions. Encouraged by the progress, he began planning new ways to strengthen their bond even further, although he realized that earning her complete trust would be a much more difficult task than he had imagined. While reflecting on the increase in the Beast Woman's affection, the protagonist realized that the progress was not connected solely to the curse affecting her. Gradually, he concluded that the change was the result of her personality and the experiences they shared together, causing him to view the situation from a new perspective. After taking a closer look at the Beast Woman's personality, the protagonist concluded that she was friendly and kind, but extremely shy when it came to romance. Realizing that she always retreated whenever their relationship advanced too far, he understood that earning her trust would be a challenge without any simple solution. After gaining a better understanding of the Beast Woman's personality, the protagonist decided to act with greater care and patience. Even though he noticed that progress had slowed, he concluded that maintaining closeness and creating pleasant conversations would be the best way to gradually increase the trust and affection between them. While searching for ways to grow closer to the Beast Woman, the protagonist concluded that listening attentively and showing genuine interest were more important than trying to appear impressive. Observing her positive reactions, he realized that strengthening their connection depended far more on understanding and empathy than on arguments or displays of superiority. As he put his new strategies into practice, the protagonist saw the Beast Woman's affection increase rapidly. Convinced that he was on the right path, he continued strengthening the bond between them until an unexpected sound from outside interrupted the moment and caught both of their attention. While discussing ways to strengthen his relationship with the Beast Woman, the protagonist was surprised by the unexpected arrival of a visitor. Upon recognizing her, he was visibly surprised and immediately began questioning the reason for her presence there, while the beast woman observed the situation without understanding what was happening. After the initial surprise, the protagonist discovered that the visitor had arrived only to deliver a message from the guildmaster. Although relieved to learn that it was not something more serious, he remained suspicious of her presence, while the beast woman watched the conversation before stepping away to prepare tea and leave the two alone to talk. While speaking with the guild messenger, the protagonist continued to distrust her intentions, as she possessed a highly suspicious reputation in his eyes. As he received the message sent by the guildmaster, he remained vigilant, believing there was more behind the visit than initially appeared. During the conversation, the messenger revealed important news. The people responsible for the attack against the protagonist had been identified. Furthermore, the guild had already prepared a trap to lure them out of hiding, planning to capture all of them at once that very night, causing the protagonist to shift his attention toward the operation that was about to take place. After receiving the details of the guild's plan, the beast woman felt relieved, believing the threat would soon be resolved. While the messenger displayed complete confidence in the success of the operation, she also made provocative comments about the growing closeness between the protagonist and the young woman, making the atmosphere slightly more uncomfortable. When the messenger teased the two about their relationship, the beast woman became extremely embarrassed and immediately denied everything. The protagonist also reacted firmly, stating that he had no intention of taking advantage of her in any way, making it clear that he respected her and had no dishonest intentions. The messenger continued teasing the protagonist, suggesting that he already viewed the beast woman as someone special. Her insinuations left the young woman completely flustered, while the protagonist tried to deny the accusations, making the situation increasingly awkward for both of them. After another series of provocations, the protagonist and the beast woman became extremely embarrassed by the rumors surrounding their relationship. Ignoring their reactions, the messenger ended her visit, reminding them of the meeting time at the guild the following day and leaving behind an atmosphere filled with pure embarrassment. After the messenger departed, the beast woman admitted that the teasing had awakened one of her greatest insecurities. Convinced that her origins and condition drove potential suitors away, she believed her chances of finding someone in the future were fading away, leaving the protagonist surprised by her sincere thoughts. Upon noticing the beast woman's sadness, the protagonist tried to cheer her up and ease her worries. Even while avoiding saying anything that might further increase her affection for him, he sought to help her recognize her own worth, making it clear that spending time by her side was something he considered special. As night fell, the protagonist attempted to reassure the beast woman, believing they would be safe inside the cabin. Convinced that they would not be attacked in their sleep, he reinforced their security measures while the two prepared to rest, although he remained attentive to the events awaiting them the next day. After taking a bath, the beast woman appeared before the protagonist in a way that left him visibly shaken. Influenced by their earlier conversations about romance and marriage, she began seeing him differently, causing her affection to grow even further. Upon noticing this change, the protagonist concluded that the situation had advanced much faster than he had expected. That night, while the protagonist slept peacefully, the beast woman remained awake watching him. With her affection growing stronger and confusing feelings emerging in her heart, she gathered the courage to approach him once again, unable to ignore what she was feeling. As she watched the protagonist sleep deeply, the beast woman realized how accustomed she had become to his presence. Feeling safe and comfortable by his side, she reflected on how this closeness was something completely new in her life, without noticing that her feelings for him continued to grow stronger with every passing moment. Overcome by the increasing affection she felt, the beast woman finally moved even closer to the protagonist while he slept. Seeking comfort and security in his presence, she reduced the distance between them, unaware that her feelings had already become far deeper than she realized. During the night, a mysterious signal attracted the beast woman's attention, causing her to leave the cabin alone and head into the forest. Unbeknownst to her, everything was part of a carefully prepared trap set by people who were waiting for her arrival among the trees. After falling into the trap, the beast woman was captured by the criminals who had lured her into the forest. While the kidnappers discussed their plans and attempted to control her, the leader of the group ordered that no one harm her, as she was valuable to their objectives. However, before they could leave, an unexpected presence began approaching, interrupting their plans. The following morning, the protagonist was awakened in a hurry when he discovered that the beast woman had disappeared. Upon realizing that she had left alone during the night, he was shocked and immediately understood that something was wrong, preparing himself to act before it was too late. After analyzing the situation, the protagonist concluded that the beast woman would never have left of her own free will and immediately suspected a kidnapping. Unable to locate her magical energy nearby, he decided to act without wasting any time, rushing toward the guild and the transportation points in hopes of finding clues before those responsible could escape. Upon discovering that the beast woman had been kidnapped, the protagonist fell into despair and immediately set out in search of her. Knowing that every moment of separation could further damage the relationship they had built together, he ran without hesitation, determined to find her before it was too late. While being transported by her kidnappers, the beast woman dreamed of the happy moments she had spent alongside the protagonist. Her peaceful smile contrasted sharply with the dangerous situation she was in, until the criminals noticed something strange about her condition and began suspecting that something unusual was happening to her. Upon arriving at the guild in search of answers, the protagonist interrupted everything by demanding information about the people responsible for the attack he had suffered. His sudden arrival surprised everyone present, especially the messenger, who had not expected to see him there so soon. Determined to find the beast woman, he pressured the guild for any clue that could lead him to the kidnappers. Arriving at the guild consumed by desperation, the protagonist accused the messenger of knowing more about the beast woman's disappearance than she was revealing. Furious and unwilling to wait for explanations, he demanded immediate answers while the woman tried to remain calm and deny any involvement, though she was visibly shaken by the intensity of his reaction. Overwhelmed by concern over the beast woman's disappearance, the protagonist lost his patience and caused a major disturbance inside the guild. While the adventurers attempted to restrain him and understand what was happening, he ignored everyone around him, focused solely on finding any clue that could lead him to her as quickly as possible. After learning that the beast woman had been kidnapped, the guildmaster immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and took the protagonist aside for a private discussion. Convinced that the disappearance was not a coincidence, the protagonist accused the messenger of being involved in the scheme, while everyone tried to determine who was truly behind the kidnapping. During the meeting with the guildmaster, the protagonist took responsibility for failing to protect the beast woman. Convinced that the messenger was involved in the kidnapping, he presented the recent events as evidence supporting his suspicions. While the accused woman denied any participation, the tension continued to rise as everyone sought to discover who had truly planned the trap. The argument intensified when the messenger denied all accusations and began claiming that the protagonist himself was the true person responsible for the beast woman's disappearance. As the two exchanged accusations in front of the guildmaster, the situation reached a stalemate, and everyone realized that concrete evidence would be necessary to determine who was lying. To settle the dispute, the guildmaster revealed the existence of a magical surveillance artifact installed inside the cabin. With it, they would be able to review the events of the previous day and discover what had really happened. Faced with this new piece of evidence, everyone turned their attention toward the recordings, realizing that the truth behind the beast woman's disappearance was about to be revealed. As they watched the cabin recordings, everyone saw the beast woman leave alone during the night under the influence of something strange. The footage made it clear that she was being manipulated, weakening the accusations against the protagonist. At the same time, suspicion increasingly fell upon the messenger, who began facing pressure from the guild authorities as the truth slowly started to come to light. During the investigation, an important member of the guild revealed that she had already been gathering evidence against the messenger for some time. As the crimes and irregularities committed under her supervision were exposed, it became clear that she was hiding far more secrets than she appeared to be, causing suspicions about her involvement in the beast woman's kidnapping to grow even stronger. With the evidence piling up, the guild's main investigator decided to act and prevented the suspect from escaping. Pressured and with no way out, the woman was forcibly interrogated about the beast woman's whereabouts, while the protagonist demanded immediate answers, determined to discover where she was before something worse happened. Under pressure, the suspect finally revealed that the beast woman had been handed over to slave traffickers and was already being taken to another country. The news shocked the protagonist, who realized that time was running out. As the guild organized a blockade on the only possible escape route, everyone quickly mobilized to stop the kidnappers from crossing the border and disappearing with the young woman. After discovering the beast woman's destination, the protagonist immediately set off in a desperate race to reach her before she crossed the border. While the person responsible for the plan mocked his urgency and claimed it was already too late, the guild's allies mobilized to block the escape route, betting everything on one final chance at rescue. After obtaining the kidnapper's approximate location, the protagonist acted without wasting any time. With the help of his magical companion, he used teleportation to shorten the distance and quickly reach the carriage, carrying the beast woman away. Determined to save her before she crossed the border, he finally found his enemy's trail and began the decisive pursuit. While being transported out of the country, the beast woman began to regain consciousness and realized the seriousness of her situation. Surrounded by slave traffickers and about to be handed over to new buyers beyond the border, she tried to remain calm. Even though she was frightened, her determined gaze showed that she had not yet lost hope of being rescued. As the kidnappers approached the border, the beast woman's situation became even more dangerous. Upon realizing the cruel intentions of her captors, she panicked and desperately called for help. At the moment, despair began to consume her. The protagonist finally appeared nearby, rapidly approaching to begin the rescue. Upon locating the kidnapper's carriage, the protagonist finally found the beast woman's whereabouts. Sensing her presence from a distance, he confirmed that he had arrived at the right place and prepared to act. Even after realizing that the long separation had affected her affection, he decided that this was the ideal moment to rescue her and end the threat of the traffickers once and for all. Upon finding the kidnappers, the protagonist decided to act immediately. Even knowing the plan was risky, he relied on the help of his magical companion to execute a surprise strategy and intercept the moving carriage. As he advanced toward the enemies at high speed, he prepared to begin the confrontation and rescue the beast woman before it was too late. The protagonist intercepted the kidnapper's carriage explosively, knocking down one of the men and surprising everyone present. Within moments, he located the beast woman trapped in the back of the vehicle and finally reunited with her. While the criminals tried to understand where the sudden attack had come from, he placed himself between them and the young woman, ready to end the kidnapping once and for all. The protagonist charged at the kidnappers with overwhelming speed, defeating his opponents before they could react. Upon finally reaching the beast woman, he apologized for being late and freed her from her captivity. Moved by seeing him arrive to save her, the young woman felt her relief and happiness overflow, while the criminals realized they had no chance against him. Even after rescuing the beast woman, the protagonist noticed that the long separation had reduced part of the affection she felt for him. Unshaken, he turned his attention to the remaining kidnappers and, merely by observing their movements, quickly assessed the enemy's skill level. Upon realizing the enormous difference in power between them, he prepared to end the confrontation before the criminals had any chance to react. The protagonist advanced without hesitation and defeated several kidnappers in a matter of seconds. For someone who had already faced far more powerful opponents, those criminals posed no real threat. As the enemies were knocked down one after another, the beast woman watched in relief, once again realizing the immense difference in power between her savior and her captors. While freeing the beast woman, the protagonist was surprised by one of the kidnappers who was still able to fight. Before the attack could reach him, the young woman noticed the danger and warned him in time. In response, he defeated the attacker with a single devastating blow, sending him flying away and ending any hope of resistance from the remaining criminals. Even after being defeated, one of the kidnappers tried to provoke the beast woman by blaming her for the death of one of his companions. Taking advantage of her emotional fragility, he attempted to make her believe that everything was a consequence of her existence and her supposed curse. Shaken by the cruel accusations, the young woman once again faced the feelings of guilt she had carried for so long. As the kidnappers tried to destroy the beast woman emotionally, they once again called her by the cruel nickname that had followed her for years. Overcome with sadness, she began to believe again that she was responsible for the tragedies around her. However, at that moment, the protagonist interrupted her and declared that he would no longer allow her to be seen that way, making it clear that he would not accept the image forced upon her. In the face of the kidnapper's cruel words, the protagonist ended the discussion with a crushing blow that sent him flying away, eliminating the last remaining threat. He then turned his attention back to the beast woman and recalled the promise he had made to stay by her side and protect her. Seeing him keep his word once again, the young woman realized that she could finally truly trust him. After being saved, the beast woman could no longer contain her emotions and ran to embrace the protagonist. Overcome by relief, gratitude, and the fear she had felt during the kidnapping, she broke down in tears while clinging to him. Seeing her finally safe, the protagonist comforted her in silence, ending the rescue with the certainty that he had managed to protect her once again. After saving the beast woman and fulfilling his promise, the protagonist saw her affection reach the maximum level. While his companion celebrated the success of the mission, she also recalled the daring rescue he had carried out, emphasizing how much he had risked himself to protect her. With that, it became clear that the bond between the two had been completely strengthened after all the challenges they had faced together. While the protagonist celebrated the Beast Woman's rescue, one of the kidnappers took advantage of the distraction to flee with the carriage. Upon noticing the escape, he immediately tried to chase after him, but was surprised when the young woman hugged him tightly, refusing to let him leave her side after everything that had happened. Still shaken by the fear of losing him, the Beast Woman begged the protagonist not to put himself in danger for her sake anymore. Relieved to see him alive and safe, she clung to him while confessing how frightened she had been. Meanwhile, the protagonist concluded that the fleeing kidnapper would probably be captured by the guild, turning his attention to the difficult task of finding a way to return home with her. While waiting for help from the guild, the protagonist decided to remain at the scene and organize the situation. His magical companion became responsible for watching over the defeated criminals and calming the carriage horses, while he observed the surroundings. At that moment, the Beast Woman approached him again, seeming to want to say something important after everything they had gone through together. While waiting to return to the city, the Beast Woman gathered the courage to reveal something extremely intimate to the protagonist. Still emotionally shaken and overwhelmed by the closeness she had developed with him, she confessed that she had entered her heat period. The revelation caught the protagonist completely by surprise, making him realize that the situation had just become far more complicated than he had imagined. As she explained her condition more clearly, the Beast Woman revealed that the period intensely affected both her body and her emotions. Not fully understanding what was happening, the protagonist listened in astonishment as she described the effects of her heat and the consequences that could arise if she lost control of the situation. Realizing the seriousness of the problem, he understood that the real challenge might only just be beginning. As the effects of her heat intensified, the Beast Woman began making increasingly embarrassing comments about the future. The protagonist became completely flustered as he realized the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. Overcome by the effects of her heat, the Beast Woman began acting increasingly impulsive and affectionate. As she moved closer without being able to control her feelings, the protagonist panicked, realizing that the situation was becoming harder and harder to handle. While trying to deal with the Beast Woman's condition, the protagonist received help from his magical companion to calm her temporarily. However, even after regaining part of her control, the young woman continued to show a strong emotional dependence on him, making it clear that the effects of her heat were still far from over. After finally calming the Beast Woman, the protagonist reflected on everything that had happened and concluded that he had fulfilled another one of his objectives. With the young woman safe and the criminals defeated, he decided to focus once again on his next mission, preparing to move forward in search of his next target. After completing the Beast Woman's rescue, the protagonist received information about his next objective. His new mission would take him to a distant sacred land, where he needed to find a nun named Anais Martine. Though exhausted from the recent events, he prepared to begin another journey in search of his next target. After discovering that his next target was a nun from a sacred land, the protagonist initially believed his next mission would be calmer. However, physically and mentally exhausted after rescuing the Beast Woman, he decided to leave his worries for later and rest while waiting for the guild reinforcements to arrive. After rescuing Lily from the kidnappers, the protagonist defeated the criminals and returned to the city with the help of the adventurers. Along the way, Lily remained extremely attached to him because of the effects of her mating cycle. Upon arriving at the guild, she regained her senses and, embarrassed by what had happened, repeatedly apologized while the protagonist received recognition for the rescue. After Lily's rescue, the protagonist refused the guild's praise and stated that he had acted only for her. Meanwhile, all the kidnappers were captured, including Kayla, and would be sent to trial, with the death penalty being practically inevitable for those found guilty. After the criminals were captured, the protagonist received a promotion to Iron Rank as a reward for his achievements. Although he showed little interest in the praise, the guild officially recognized his accomplishments. Then, the guild master revealed that he already had a new mission prepared for him, taking advantage of his recent rise as an adventurer. The following day, the protagonist intended to depart for his next target, but the guild master insisted that he accept a special mission. Surprised, he discovered that the task involved escorting a saint, a rare and extremely important opportunity for any adventurer. The guildmaster explained that the mission consisted of escorting a young saint who had recently been blessed by the goddess. She would pass through the city the next day during her journey from the sacred land to the kingdom's capital, and the protagonist would have to accompany and protect her throughout the entire route. When questioning why a saint needed additional escorts, the protagonist received a concerning explanation about the situation within the church. The guildmaster revealed that the institution was filled with corruption and internal disputes, making it so that not even someone blessed by the goddess was completely safe. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, the protagonist concluded that this mission could be far more complicated than it seemed at first glance. The guildmaster revealed that the mission had arisen because there were people within the church who did not look favorably upon the emergence of a new saint. Fearing possible conspiracies or attacks during the journey, a trusted priest had requested someone skilled to reinforce the escort. Despite his surprise, the protagonist realized that he had been chosen precisely because of his reliability and ability. The guildmaster insisted that the protagonist accept the mission, explaining that escorting Saint Aeneas Martin to the capital would help keep him temporarily away from the recent problems. Although reluctant, he eventually listened to the details of the task and discovered that the job would be relatively simple. Accompany the saint during her journey and ensure her safety until they reached their destination. While traveling toward the city where she would meet her escort, Saint Aeneas Martin displayed a gentle and serene attitude before the faithful. However, away from the public eye, her true personality began to appear. Tired from the long journey and from the perfect image she had to maintain, she revealed a far more relaxed and carefree side, completely contrasting with the sacred figure everyone admired. As he prepared for the escort mission, the protagonist was finally introduced to the group responsible for the saint. During the meeting, he discovered that Aeneas Martin was also his next target within the system. While keeping this information secret, he officially introduced himself as the adventurer chosen to protect her during the journey to the capital. The protagonist met Bengler, the priest responsible for accompanying the saint during the journey. Despite holding an important position within the church, the man showed that he had an old and friendly relationship with the guildmaster. After some jokes and memories of the past, the two set aside their nostalgia to discuss the details of the mission that was about to begin. During the conversation, Bengler explained the origin of Aeneas Martin as a saint. After the former saint was summoned to the royal capital, the goddess's blessing descended upon Aeneas, choosing her as her successor. Upon hearing this, the protagonist began to learn more about the church and the role of saints in that world, realizing the importance of the young woman he was supposed to protect. Bengler explained that the church was divided by an intense power struggle between different religious factions. In addition to the selection of a new saint, a new archbishop would also be chosen, and the saint herself would have influence over that decision. Because of this political rivalry, Aeneas had become an extremely important figure, increasing the risks and the need to protect her during her journey. As he analyzed the situation, the protagonist realized that the dispute over the position of archbishop could be a motive for attacks against Aeneas. Bengler confirmed this possibility and revealed that there was only one saint per generation. If Aeneas died, the goddess would choose another successor, which could benefit certain factions within the church and make the young woman an even more valuable target. While discussing the possible motives behind a conspiracy against Aeneas, the protagonist was surprised by the political logic of the church, even questioning the decisions of the goddess herself. Bengler explained that, precisely because of these disputes, there was a high chance that assassins were infiltrated among the saints' attendants, making the mission far more dangerous than it appeared. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the protagonist continued making irreverent comments about the goddess and the church. Instead of reprimanding him, the guildmaster concluded that his laid-back personality could be an advantage, believing that someone who was not easily intimidated was exactly the kind of person needed to protect the saint. The guildmaster reaffirmed his trust in the protagonist, believing that his actions during Lily's rescue had proven his worth. Even without understanding why he had been chosen for such an important mission, he eventually accepted the task. While discussing the travel preparations, he discovered that he would not be allowed to travel in the saint's carriage and would need to find another way to remain close to her during the escort. While organizing the details of the escort, the protagonist received a new traveling companion, Amelia, the competent secretary of the guild. Despite protesting the decision, she was assigned to accompany him during the mission, while someone else temporarily took over her duties. Although displeased, Amelia eventually accepted the order and began preparing to depart alongside the protagonist and Lily. While Amelia remained unhappy about being assigned to the mission, the group discussed the preparations for departure. Bengler explained that the saint would participate in a ceremony at the city's church before the journey, but revealed that some unexpected problems had delayed the schedule. Because of that, the escort would only depart the following morning, giving the protagonist more time to prepare for the journey. During the preparations for the escort, Bengler introduced one of the few people authorized to remain by the saint's side throughout the entire journey, Sister Claudia, her personal attendant. He explained that Ananias's inner circle was extremely restricted for security reasons, which led the protagonist to question how many people would actually be part of the group assigned to protect her. Bengler revealed that the saint's escort would consist of around 30 people, including 7 holy knights sent by the Church of the Royal Capital. Upon hearing this, the protagonist realized that some of the guards themselves could be involved in conspiracies, making the mission even more dangerous. The possibility of enemies being hidden within the group reinforced his suspicions about the complexity of the task. After accepting the mission to escort the saint, the protagonist showed little enthusiasm and once again complained about the goddess responsible for constantly placing him in troublesome situations. While they prepared for departure, Amelia continued organizing the details of the trip alongside the future escort. Even resigned to the task, the protagonist decided to move forward, believing that once again he would end up involved in something much bigger than it appeared at first glance. During the mission preparations, Amelia admitted that the protagonist was the best available option to escort the saint, but made it clear that the merit of that choice belonged to the guildmaster, not to him. While the two continued exchanging provocations, the protagonist realized that, whether he liked it or not, he would need to work together with Amelia throughout the entire mission. While walking through the city, the protagonist checked Amelia's status and was surprised to discover that her affection for him was higher than he had imagined. Confused by the result, he tried to understand the reason for that sudden change, while his small companion simply observed the situation with curiosity. In the end, he concluded that, despite their constant arguments, Amelia had probably already grown accustomed to his presence. While waiting for the mission to depart, the protagonist and Amelia were called to meet the saint they were supposed to escort. Before the introduction could happen, Lily appeared running to say goodbye, showing all her gratitude and affection toward the protagonist after being saved. Her unexpected arrival briefly interrupted the preparations, creating a lighter atmosphere before the beginning of the journey. Before leaving, the protagonist said goodbye to Lily, who showed concern for his safety and revealed her desire to meet him again in the future. During the farewell, she made an unexpected request for him to visit her homeland when he returned. Surprised by the invitation and by the young woman's sincerity, the protagonist was momentarily left speechless, while his small companion watched everything attentively. During the farewell, Lily shyly revealed that she hoped to introduce the protagonist to her parents in the future, leaving him completely unable to react to the unexpected display of affection. While he tried to process those words, Amelia and the others interrupted the moment, reminding him that it was already time to leave. With the farewell finally concluded, the group set out to begin the mission of escorting the saint to the capital. After saying goodbye to Lily, the protagonist finally ended the long farewell and followed the group to meet the saint he was supposed to protect. As they walked, the priest explained details of the mission, revealing that the saint would travel in a private carriage throughout the entire route. Determined to accompany him until the last moment, Lily continued watching his departure as the group advanced toward the beginning of the escort. The priest explained that the saint's carriage was protected by sacred magic and was quite safe during the journey. However, he warned that she would be vulnerable whenever she needed to leave the carriage, making the protagonist and Amelia understand the risks of the mission. The group was finally introduced to Saint Ananias. Displaying humility and politeness, she thanked her new escorts and apologized for the trouble caused by the long journey. Upon seeing her for the first time, the protagonist was surprised by her appearance and realized that this mission might be more complicated than he had imagined. After analyzing the saint's status, the protagonist discovered a surprising piece of information. The system classified her as a false saint. Despite the strangeness of the revelation, he decided not to worry about it for the moment, since his priority remained protecting her. Determined to fulfill the mission, he began acting like a true knight and vowed to ensure the young woman's safety throughout the entire journey. When he vowed to protect the saint, the protagonist expected her affection to increase, but was shocked to see the value plummet into negative numbers. Unable to understand the reason for that reaction, he became completely confused while Ananias remained impassive. Before he could reflect on the matter, Amelia brought him back to reality, leaving him even more intrigued by the young saint's behavior. When trying to justify his behavior, the protagonist only further irritated Amelia, who began treating him as a potential problem for the mission. While the group prepared to depart, Ananias silently observed everything, showing a reaction that was difficult to interpret. With the atmosphere becoming increasingly strange, the saint's escort finally began. As the mission began, the protagonist remained intrigued by the sudden drop in Aeneas's affection. Trying to find an explanation, he began to suspect that the young saint might have some trauma or distrust related to men, which would justify her negative reaction. Even without being certain of the cause, he decided to remain attentive to her behavior throughout the journey. While reflecting on the saint's mysterious reaction, the protagonist concluded that this was simply another unexpected problem arising in his journey. Shortly afterward, the group finally began traveling, but Amelia took the opportunity to make it clear that she would keep an eye on him throughout the entire mission, determined to prevent any suspicious behavior toward the saint. Before departing, Amelia made a direct threat to the protagonist, warning him that she would not forgive him if he hurt Lily. After the warning, the group continued the journey normally, while the protagonist changed the subject and began thinking about another important matter involving the memories of the people affected by the recent events. While talking with his companion, the protagonist discovered that the memories related to the recent events would only be erased after the completion of the current mission. Shortly afterward, as he left the city, he noticed that some familiar people had gathered at the entrance, apparently ready to say goodbye to the group before the start of the long journey to the capital. After the final farewells, Lily wished the protagonist and the group good luck before their departure. Even while trying to maintain her composure, she showed sadness at seeing them leave, while the protagonist responded calmly. With everything finally prepared, the escort left the city and began the long journey toward the capital, marking the beginning of the next stage of the mission. After a long period of travel, the group finally approached the inn where they would spend the night. Before the saint left the carriage, Amelia reinforced the importance of ensuring the area's safety, keeping her full focus on the mission. Meanwhile, the protagonist treated the situation more lightly, and the saint's arrival quickly drew the attention of the people around them. Upon arriving at the inn, Anais was enthusiastically welcomed by the residents, who quickly gathered to see her up close. While Amelia remained alert and focused on security, the protagonist observed the saint's enormous popularity. Although they usually disagreed on almost everything, he eventually acknowledged that Amelia's constant concern made sense given the attention Anais attracted wherever she went. While escorting the saint toward her destination, the protagonist argued with Amelia about the immense devotion people showed toward the goddess and her representatives. Without hiding his dislike for the deity responsible for many of his problems, he made it clear that he held no respect for her. Even so, his companion insisted that, regardless of his personal feelings, he should at least show a minimum level of consideration for the goddess worshipped throughout the kingdom. Upon noticing a rare opportunity to speak directly with Aeneas, the protagonist decided to act before Amelia could interrupt him. Convinced that treating the saint with extreme courtesy would be the best way to approach her, he introduced himself politely and offered to help open the carriage. While trying to begin a favorable conversation, he believed that no woman would reject being treated with such consideration and respect. When attempting to win Aeneas's trust with chivalrous gestures, the protagonist received a cold and unexpected response. The saint immediately refused his help, causing her affection level to drop even further. Surprised by the negative reaction, he realized that his strategy had completely failed, while Amelia took control of the situation and led Anais to the carriage without any difficulty. After his failed attempt to approach the saint, the protagonist became the target of teasing from his spiritual companion and Amelia. With little else to do, he decided to end the day and rest at the inn. While the others prepared for the next day's journey, he used the night to recover his strength, although he continued reflecting on the strange hostility Anais had shown since their first meeting. During the night, the protagonist remained irritated by the false saint's attitude and could not understand why her affection had dropped so drastically. Not even his spiritual companion could find a plausible explanation for that reaction. Unable to approach Anais or discover her true intentions, he realized he would have to continue the mission practically in the dark, searching for another way to earn her trust. While resting at the inn, the protagonist analyzed the escort situation and realized that his opportunities to get closer to Anais would be extremely limited. During stops, Amelia stayed beside the saint almost the entire time, taking responsibility for her protection outside the carriage. Observing the group's routine, he concluded that he would only have a chance to interact directly with his new target during very specific moments of the journey. While planning new ways to approach Anais, the protagonist concluded that he would need to act with patience and observe her reactions before attempting any bolder strategy. At the same time, the saint continued her routine normally, closely accompanied by her attendants, maintaining the distance that made any direct contact between them difficult. While resting alone, Aeneas showed that she was emotionally shaken by the situation she was facing. Feeling uncomfortable with the way she was treated and fearing the moment when her true identity would be discovered, she reflected on the events that had led her there. Consumed by insecurity and discouragement, the young woman questioned how she had ended up involved in such a complicated situation. 1 week after the escort began, the group continued advancing through mountainous regions toward the capital. Throughout that time, the protagonist tried to approach Aeneas several times, but he failed to make any progress. Frustrated by the situation, he began to realize that earning the false saint's trust would be much more difficult than he had imagined. After an entire week of failed attempts, the protagonist's situation only worsened. Instead of increasing his closeness with Aeneas, each interaction seemed to make her affection drop even further. Observing the accumulated results, his companion concluded that the false saint had developed a strong dislike for him, making it clear that earning her trust would be far more difficult than expected. After countless failed attempts to get closer to Aeneas, the protagonist began to feel discouraged by the situation. Unlike previous targets, he could not understand the reason behind the constant decline in the false saint's affection. While reflecting on the problem during the journey, he eventually admitted that he was frustrated and out of ideas to reverse that increasingly complicated scenario. While crossing the dangerous Kiluga Gorge, the group doubled their attention, since any ambush in that place could be fatal. As they advanced along a narrow path surrounded by cliffs, Amelia warned the protagonist about the risks of the route, making it clear that a simple fall would mean death. Faced with the treacherous terrain, everyone proceeded with extreme caution to avoid any accident or surprise attack. While they crossed the gorge, Amelia analyzed the escort's formation and concluded that that section was relatively safe, since the narrow road made ambushes difficult. Even so, she remained vigilant, mainly distrusting the knights sent by the Church of the Capital. Convinced that an attack would not happen in such a predictable place, she continued carefully observing everyone around her as the group advanced through the gorge. As they crossed the gorge, a massive trap was activated, and giant logs came crashing down from the mountain. The attack caught the escort by surprise, causing carriages and horses to lose control amid the chaos. In the confusion, Aeneas's carriage was thrown off the road, placing the false saint in grave danger. Upon noticing the accident, Amelia panicked while the group tried to react to the sudden ambush. When the carriage plunged off the cliff, the protagonist did not hesitate and threw himself after Aeneas to save her. Risking his own life, he managed to cushion the fall and protect the young woman from the impact. After narrowly surviving the accident, the two ended up separated from the rest of the escort at the bottom of the gorge. As he caught his breath, the protagonist realized that he had finally managed to be alone with the false saint, although under extremely dangerous circumstances. Upon seeing the carriage falling with Aeneas still trapped inside, the protagonist recalled the instant he made his decision. Realizing that he would not be able to reach her in time on his own, he asked his spiritual companion for help and, without hesitation, launched himself toward the abyss. Even in an almost impossible situation, he decided to risk everything to save the false saint before it was too late. While plummeting toward the abyss, the protagonist realized that the situation was even worse than he had imagined. One of the logs struck the carriage during the fall, destroying its structure and drastically reducing the chances of rescuing Anaïs safely. Faced with the imminent disaster, he had to think quickly of a way to save her before the final impact became inevitable. When he saw Aeneas being thrown out of the carriage in the middle of the abyss, the protagonist fell into despair. Unable to reach her in time by himself, he turned to Jibril for help while watching the saint fall toward death. With only a few moments to act, all hope of saving her depended on a miracle. After narrowly escaping the tragedy, the protagonist confirmed that Aeneas had been saved thanks to Jibril's intervention. While recovering from the shock, he acknowledged that without that help, the false saint would probably have died along with the carriage. Despite the relief, the incident made it clear just how dangerous that mission truly was. After the disaster with the carriage, the protagonist spoke with Jibril and discovered that the coachman had disappeared during the accident, increasing his worries even more. While regretting that he had not been able to save everyone involved, he also realized how much he depended on the help of his spiritual companion. At the same time, Aeneas remained unconscious, leaving the group uncertain about what the consequences of that failed attack would be. As he analyzed the accident, the protagonist realized that the coachman's disappearance was far too suspicious to be a coincidence. Concluding that he probably knew about the attack in advance, he began to believe that there was a conspiracy behind the assassination attempt. Seeing this as an opportunity to find clues about those responsible, he began considering his next steps while evaluating the best way to act in that dangerous situation. After saving Anais from the accident, the protagonist realized that this was the perfect opportunity to get closer to her. Convinced that he needed to regain her trust and increase her affection, he decided to become the only person she could rely on in that moment. As he drew up his plans, he believed that the danger surrounding the false saint might end up working in his favor. After surviving the attack, the protagonist developed a new strategy to increase his closeness with Anais. He believed that facing danger together and cooperating to overcome difficulties would strengthen the bond between them, making the false saint trust him more. Convinced that the situation could be turned into an opportunity, he decided to use the journey to become someone indispensable in her eyes. While investigating the attack, the protagonist suspected that more infiltrators were involved in the plan. At the same time, he decided to set the investigation aside for the moment and focus his attention on Anais, who was finally beginning to wake up. Upon waking after the accident, Anais reacted with extreme hostility when she found the protagonist beside her. Confused and suspicious, she immediately assumed the worst about his intentions, leaving the protagonist completely surprised by her aggressive reaction. After waking up, Anais surprised everyone by completely changing her attitude and acting friendly and relaxed. The contrast between her earlier aggression and her current behavior left the protagonist confused, making him question what her true personality was as the two resumed their conversation. After confirming that she had survived the attack, Anais listened to the account of the accident and realized the seriousness of the situation. While the protagonist explained how the carriage had fallen from the cliff, he took the opportunity to praise her and attribute her survival to divine protection. Still shaken by what had happened, the false saint began to reflect on everything that had occurred. After escaping the cliff, Anais showed concern for the rest of the group and wanted to return immediately. However, the protagonist realized that climbing back up that way would be impossible. With no alternatives, the two concluded that they would need to continue the journey on their own and find another way to reach the royal capital. While trying to win Anais's trust with promises of protection and loyalty, the protagonist only made the situation worse. The false saint's cold reaction caused her affection to drop once again, leading him to realize that his words were producing the opposite effect from what he expected. Even so, he believed he had finally understood the source of her rejection and decided to observe more carefully before acting again. Upon realizing that his attempts to act like an exemplary knight only made the situation worse, the protagonist decided to be more honest about his true thoughts. His change in attitude caught Anais's attention, and she began observing him with greater interest after noticing that he did not show the devotion or admiration she usually received from other people. After completely abandoning the posture of a devoted knight, the protagonist began treating Anais directly and without any reverence. To his surprise, this sincerity caused her affection to increase for the first time in a long while. Noticing the change, he began to believe that the false saint felt more comfortable around people who saw her as an ordinary person rather than as a sacred figure. As he continued being honest and treating Anais naturally, the protagonist finally saw her affection increase a little more. Realizing that he had found a more effective approach, he decided to abandon exaggerated formalities and continue the journey while carefully observing the false saint's reactions. As the journey continued, the protagonist noticed that Anais's affection kept increasing precisely when he treated her without reverence. After reflecting on the false saint's behavior, he concluded that she hated being seen as a sacred figure and preferred to be treated like an ordinary person. With this discovery, he believed he had finally found the key to earning her trust. While reflecting on Anais's behavior, the protagonist finally understood that her rejection stemmed from the discomfort of being treated as a perfect saint. Comparing the situation to a form of imposter syndrome, he concluded that she felt more at ease when she was viewed as an ordinary person. With this discovery, he came to believe that he had found the best way to get closer to her. While analyzing Anais's behavior, the protagonist concluded that her life as a false saint had placed her under enormous pressure. Realizing that she reacted better when treated as an ordinary person, he began to understand why her affection was gradually increasing. Even so, he remained intrigued by the unexpected speed of that change. While observing Lily from afar, the protagonist noticed that the girl's feelings continued to fluctuate unpredictably. Even though she showed signs of affection, her emotions changed rapidly, making it clear that she was still confused and uncertain about the relationship between the two of them. As he continued analyzing Anais, The protagonist began to suspect that her strange behavior might be connected to some kind of curse or deep emotional trauma. Realizing that the time remaining before they reached the capital was limited, he concluded that he needed to find a way to quickly increase the false saint's trust before it was too late. After reuniting with the survivors of the attack, Amelia reported everything that had happened at the cliff. Upon hearing the explanation, Bengler quickly realized that there was something suspicious behind the incident and ordered the secretary's arrest, believing that she might be involved in the conspiracy against Aeneas. After being captured by the knights, Amelia was shocked to discover that she was being held responsible for the attack against Aeneas. Bengler concluded that, since she had been in charge of the saint's protection during the journey, she should be held accountable for the mission's failure. As she tried to make sense of the situation, Amelia realized that she had become the primary suspect in the case. After the disaster in the gorge, Bengler ordered that Amelia be taken to the royal capital as the person responsible for the escort's failure. While she was being arrested and apologizing to her master, Aeneas suddenly reappeared alive before everyone, making the situation even more confusing and casting doubt on the accusations made against the knight.